This is a wonderful opportunity to talk to you all here in the venue and also to you who are online. And today's event goal is to wrap up our project, Provahealth project. And for the last 2.5 years, we were figuring out how to collaborate between transnational living labs. What is a living lab? What are the obstacles in collaboration with companies, and how we can improve the outcome from the collaboration of with the living labs. So today we will talk about more like technical questions and discuss all the outcomes from the project. And tomorrow's event is also still ongoing, although we had to change the last panel, so we will have only 2 panels, and third panel will be online version, so all the presentations still will be available online. Good, we have internet. So, but are we ready with the first presenter? Hopefully we are. Oh yes. So Fred has he sent us already his presentation, so it is recorded already yesterday. But hopefully he will be online for the questions after the presentation. So you can start the presentation.
Hi, and welcome to my presentation on evaluating transnational living lab testing in Baltic Sea region living labs. My name is Jens Dinesen Strandbæk, and in the
Hello Tallinn, sorry I couldn't join you. I hope that this will work out well anyhow. My name is Fred Kjellson. I'm from the organization of Innovation Skåne, which are one of the partners in the project Provahealth, which you will hear more about today. I will now talk about our work in the project, which is the Transnational Living Lab collaboration, and some of the results from that. So let's dig into it. In our work, we've focused on best practice workshops, and the other work is drivers and obstacles for the transnational collaboration, and looking into a maturity model. Other Provahealth results which feeds into our work are SME pilots, policy work, self-assessment toolbox, and business model and services. However, these results will be presented in the other presentations later on today. So, if we start with the best practice workshops, we've held 3 workshops over the project period. You can see them in this slide. These have been focused on services, looking at real users and stakeholders, business model and sustainability, value propositions, activities for the participating living labs, and of course impact and result assessment. I'll briefly go through them, these results, and see, so that you can get an idea of it. First of all, if you look at the services that are usually inquired, one way of looking at it is to see what sort of questions SMEs usually need to be answered. And we can look at these development phases that are you can see on the slide. For instance, for the product idea, usually a question arises: do the market actually exist? And also, is this market sound for my product idea? And if further on, when you can reach the concept level, you usually have to look at functionality, what functions are actually needed and what are not needed. And then further on, you need to fine-tune the product. How can that be achieved? You have to look at product market fit. How is this product going to be received by the healthcare system, etc. So throughout these product development phases, there are questions that need to be answered. One way to look at successful living lab collaboration and how SMEs can respond to the demands of the healthcare and wellness industry is to look at it from a push-pull perspective. What sort of products are needed, or what sort of solutions are needed? And also, where can these two, the need and the business idea, merge? And that is in the co-operation, co-creation stages of a transnational living lab collaboration. And this achieves the growth, the necessary growth of the SME, and the implementation of solve the needs of the healthcare. Issues that can arise in this sort of collaborations are such as how can the IP rights be protected and handled, and also the other issues are such as research of the healthcare specifically. Related to that are reimbursement systems that needs to be in place of the living lab itself and of the healthcare system. Another thing that needs to be taken care of is to protect future possibilities for procurement, so that the development work does not hinder such a future procurement. These are all stages or all handled by the ecosystem of the individual living labs. So you need academia, individuals such as citizens, public sector and industry to solve these societal needs. Other results from the best practice workshops have been business model and sustainability. So if you look at this slide, you see that there are different levels to it. You have the vision and strategy level, which need to be aligned with open innovation or semi-open innovation and co-creation approach in this case. You have an operational level where you need to have access to the the healthcare most often, or the other wellness or health organizations. You need support platforms, and you need to have a co-creation services in place. And you also have to have a partnership level where you can bring in external competencies to the mix in order to achieve good outcomes. All of this needs to be in place in order to create the necessary tools for decision support to create the better product market fit for the individual SME solution. And that is acting as a contact point, access to experts and users, and access to networking capabilities, both regionally, nationally and internationally. If we look at the necessary tool for actually measuring the outcome of it, you have innovation and measuring result as one of the core components as well. Because if you have a need, you have to work with the need and demand. You look at the results from your suggested setup. You have to have a vision guiding the future work, looking at outputs from that and the necessary target from that, and you get the research and input and in the end an impact. Another way to look at it is to look at innovation process and measurement process in tandem. So you look at expected benefit and you do a desktop research, what can be expected. And then you need to design what sort of measurement, what type of measurement you involve. And then you follow up and do your measurement, do your analysis, and then you disseminate. Each of these can be, you go deeper into for each level and follow an iterative process. So next, the other type of work we did was looking at drivers and obstacles for transnational living lab partnership or collaboration. So what factors actually affects living labs and SMEs transnational collaboration, and what can motivate and hinder such a collaboration. So, drivers for transnational setup. One of these drivers are actually improvement on the individual living labs and the sharing of services across borders. And also that building up a reliable partner network to assist you in all kinds of endeavors are judged to have a value. Also improving communication so that each individual living lab can take a smaller burden instead of a larger one. Other identified drivers were to improve its own services and also access services of the partner living lab in this perspective. In terms of marketing, that you can actually achieve a more visible marketing of your own living lab within the network was also deemed a positive thing. And of course access to knowledge and experience and technologies from other partners within the network. Obstacle for transnational setup were identified, and they were that different regulations in the countries and different business culture actually affects collaboration and how much energy you need to spend on it. Another issue that was identified is that different living labs have different interests, and that can hinder or at least affect the collaboration. Other things that were identified were that the competences and resources of the other partner living labs were in most cases not well known or understood. So that is another issue that can be a problem in this area. Now for the third part of our work, we looked at the maturity model for transnational living lab collaboration. So the model is a 4-stage model that describes transnational collaboration maturity between 2 or more partnering living labs. So in the work we identified factors and sub-factors that were deemed important and that had a logical and clear setup in terms of what it contained and it did not contain. So the factors were environment, membership, structure, process, communication, purpose, goal and vision, and resources. I will not go through each and every sub-factor, but we will have a look at political social climate, cost sharing, and technical resources for more detailed description. Now the maturity model have these 4 levels: network, coordinated network, cooperation, and collaboration. And one way to look at it is that the network is more of a community with, you might describe it as friends or friendly living labs that have some form of ad hoc communication. And in this stage, communication is one of the most important things, that it works well and you have a good connection. The coordinated network can commonly be described as a project where you have some form of common goal and you harmonize around the project and project parameters. In this stage, the environment and membership of the project and of the surrounding ecosystem and society becomes important. The next stage, you can say that is a sort of a program. That is where you have partnered up with other participating living labs for a while, and you have built trust, and you've decided to go to the next level and form the form of a program or a group of living labs that have a more long-term vision. In this stage, process, structure, and membership becomes more important. The last stage, which is the collaboration, is where two or more partnering living labs have formed a very, very close partnership. And in this stage, purpose, goal, and vision becomes extremely important. And here you add, usually I have a very high focus on resources and process structure as well. Now, if we look at membership and cost sharing, the stages goes like you don't have a fee in stage one, the network one. The coordinated network, you usually have a project financing, setting the boundary for that. Cooperation, then you add, you might still have project finance, but you can add a membership fee to the mix. And in the last stage, collaboration, you have formed a strategic joint agreement, commonly about sharing of resources or such. Now, if we look at the environment, political, social climate, you might say in the network stage, you don't have a support from corporate, region, national and EU political and social climate, supporting living labs and transnational mission. And then that improves over the 4 stages until you have in the collaboration phase, you have a corporate, regional, national or EU political and social climate support fully implemented for the transnational mission of the living labs. So that is the stage step in between as well. For technical resources, you can say that in a network phase you don't have a sharing of technical resources. Whereas if you move up to coordinated network, you shared use of predefined limited technical resource for a set time frame, commonly a project or such. However, when you reach cooperation, you have a sharing of and coordination of a limited use of a technical resource pool, but with a long-term commitment. But during the collaboration phase, you have add a permanent joint technical research and optimized cross-organizational access to resource allocation on business as usual principle. So that is have a very, very high integration of the research pool. So for wrapping it up, we can say that in this work we have focused on a maturity model, which sort of gives an evolutionary stage-wise approach to living lab and living lab collaboration. We looked at best practice, which gives us the necessary tools to improve our work and carry out our work. And we looked at drivers and obstacles, which forms the reason for why the transnational collaboration is needed and should be used. The other work packages or work in the Provahealth project have been policy, services, business model, pilots and self-assessment tool. All of these are sort of feeding into the transnational living lab model, which you will and you will hear more about them later on today. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. Welcome to Tallinn online.
Thank you, Piret.
Yeah. So now we have a chance to ask questions. Right away, no questions. But I do have a question to you, Fred. Do you see me, Fred, somehow?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. So I have a question to you. You say that well, just give me three main obstacles in your mind that actually preventing smooth collaboration between companies and living labs.
Companies and living labs, there is, I think one of the main problem is a cultural problem, or more you have living labs which usually either comes from the academic world or the public healthcare world, and then you have SMEs that have a more of a business culture. Of course, that is I think is one of the main problems. You also have a problem in terms of course, funding issues that within this specific business in health and healthcare are a bit more expensive to develop products in, and you need to develop it in close contact with the specific healthcare or living lab partner, and you it's more often it's clinical trials which are extremely expensive. Another issue, if we're talking about the transnational part, is a problem of transnational funding, which is quite commonly a difficult setup where you have national funding agencies which limits cost to their own country, etc. So I think that would be the main problematic areas in this perspective.
But do you also have a recipe how to solve these issues?
Well, one recipe is to work in setups such as Provahealth, where you try to find a funding setup which is across several borders, where you have close collaboration between living labs and companies. I think that is the best way forward, at least on the short-term perspective. I think in a long-term perspective, we need to work on large funding changes in terms of policy and that sort of thing.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions to Fred? From the project partners, perhaps? No. So thank you, Fred, for your contribution, and it worked quite well, actually.
Yeah,
yes, oh, Tina has a question, so yeah.
Thank you. Oh, okay, my question is about the transnational networking. You told many obstacles there, and quite a big issues what we need to first do, get money and so on. But what do you think? Is it possible to have a network without money?
I didn't hear the last part. Without what?
Without money.
It's possible to have a network that is, I think, if you think of it, a maturity model, a network is just a network. It's like you have, you can say you have friends in other places, so to speak. That's a network. It doesn't cost anything to have a network. There is some form of, social energy that you need to put up. But when you want to do something in the network, then it starts to cost money. So that is when you need to go to the next level, where you try to set up, have a common goal within a project, or with some form of vision or goal. So it's like a stepwise approach, I think.
I think that it's my opinion is that it's not always necessary to have that kind of. It can be network without any funding, for example, I belong. It's educational network in Nordic countries. We don't have any fees or fund, but still we meet regularly and we have conferences and we have common goal. And I think that this kind of movement of living labs or test beds is that we need collaboration and we need networking, sharing good experiences, because it's developing fast. Okay.
Yes, I agree. I think it's a question of when you have reached a next level, then your own organization sees the value and commit commit to the network and allow some form of common cost to be shared across the participants.
Yeah. Any other questions? No more questions. So yeah. Yes, we will share the slides, and also this recording will be available on our website. So all the materials will be distributed to every single person who is interested in this topic. So, but we are, I guess, Fred, thank you. Thank you for your contribution. And
thank you, Peter, for letting me talk remotely.
Yeah, but it works. So,
yeah.
So next time, for the next time, I guess that we might move to online space anyway. So yeah, but thank you, Fred, and we are ready for the next presentation, I guess. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
See, applause. So. We have offline presentation now available, so use this.
Okay, thank you. Hello, happy to be here. At least it feels safe in here because I was coming with ferry from Finland and they were measuring the temperatures in the ferry terminal. So basically, at least if you came by ferry, all of those should be okay in here. So my name is Teemu Santonen and I come from the Lauri Applied Science Universities from Finland. And we are talking about the Living Lab business models and services, which the data was collected and co-created, the solutions were co-created among these Provahealth partners. But before I jump to, let's talk about a little bit about what is a Living Lab. How many of you know or working with the Living Lab environment? How well you know? Raise your hands if you know everything about, or you know what is the Living Lab. Raise your hand, please. Okay, anyway, some people who don't know about, so I think it's a good idea to come with kind of a short introduction. What is a Living Lab? So basically it's an open innovation 2.0 ecosystem, because the open innovation was originally kind of the innovation process where a company was collaborating with its customers. But in 2.0 approach, we kind of expand the stakeholders among this ecosystem by introducing the academia, public sector players, and civil society in general. First and foremost, it's a user-centered process. So basically, we are trying to build up a solution which kind of are user-friendly, or actually addressing the needs that users really have. It's typically happening in the real life or simulated environment. So basically, when we are testing or when we are co-creating solutions, we are actually doing that in real environments or the simulation environments. It's a systematic method, but using multiple approaches depending on which phase of the innovation process you are working. And it's also an iterative co-creation process. Typically, I've been working in the field of innovation for the past 20 years or almost, and rarely you get the solution right at the first time. So basically, you need to have multiple iterations. So let's talk about the Living Lab-based innovation process. Fred was already a little bit talking about that. If we have the first axle in here, we think about solution maturity. At the bottom it's low, at the top is high. And we think about the innovation process maturity when the time goes by. We start with the need, challenge, and opportunity identification, which Fred was already talking a little bit about. So we have to understand what is the problem, what is the need that we are actually trying to solve. Then we jump on the idea generation and testing phase, testing ideas. Typically it's a high-level idea, kind of a very high-level description about what we could be doing. In some cases, we have to go back. Basically, iterative process, jumping between the phases. Once we feel about that we have kind of solid ideas available, we can do a concept development. Basically meaning we are doing illustration, kind of lower-level mock-ups or descriptions about what is the concept. And once again, we can go back either previous stage or until the end. And then we can jump on the proof of concept phase, where we have kind of an not really fully finished solutions, but kind of an interactive solution where the users can actually experience how it's going to be working, the solution. But it's not yet fully functional. You cannot run that as a part of the system. And once everything is ready, you have to be validating the solutions. In a real-life setting, for example, you have a device and you are claiming that this is, helping to improve the physical fitness of the persons. Okay, let's use that device and run tests and make sure and do an impact assessment. Is that really an effective solution? And once everything is ready, you can still do post-implementation and post-market analysis. So this is basically the phases where in every stage you can utilize a Living Lab approach. And the process goes in a way that in the early stages you have less information. That further you go, you have more information available. On the other hand, when you are going to the stepwise process in here, your costs are also increasing. And what does it mean is that your ability to make changes is reducing. And this is really important because as part of this project, we kind of, and also during having an interviews with the healthcare professionals and all the other ecosystem players, we noticed that in many cases, SMEs are jumping on this Living Lab process too late. So they are coming with the already kind of an almost ready solution, which is actually not addressing those needs that, for example, healthcare professionals would be wanting to be solved. So there's a mismatch between the market demand and the offered solution, and this is really important. I skipped this slide that there's a little bit more information about what are the different stages and the differences between the stages. So what is the business model? Unfortunately, as in many cases in scientific literature, we don't have a fully agreed that what is a business model. There are a bunch of different definitions. But in general, it's kind of the method which the organization builds and uses its resources and offers kind of solutions which are better than their competitors and make a profit by doing so. If you want to know more about this kind of what is business model in general, I suggest this Osterwald great publication about that topic. Probably the most popular approach to look at the business models is business model canvas, which divides the business model into different sections. You have the key partners, key activities, key resources, and you have a value proposition, customer relationships, channels. You have the customer segments, and cost structure, and revenue streams. How many of you know this business model canvas as a tool? Raise your hands. So great, it's very popular. So that's why also we were using this as a part of our project. So there's also some research focusing on the Living Lab business model. So basically, the studies are focusing on understanding the multi-stakeholder-driven collaboration, how that is done, how to generate revenue, how Living Labs can make a revenue by the operating, and also kind of how the Living Lab can be used as a methodological tool to develop business models. And also the response of other researches, but I think it's not sensible to go through them right now, but you can find these online as well through these links. So how did we develop our own solutions? So basically we asked our Provahealth partners to fill out actually not one business model canvas, but 4 different business model canvas. And throughout the kind of we started to construct what we call a business model survey. Because when the people were filling the canvases, it's basically open-ended responses. And all of those responses were collected to us, and throughout that we tried to identify individual attributes and items which were described. And based on that, we end up in a survey which was asking that how important that particular attribute within one of the business model items was for that particular living lab. And the scale was 9, extremely very important, and 3 medium importance, 1 weak importance, and 0 not important at all. And then we collected the data from the partners. And afterwards, after a year, we also did some interviews with the partners about how they perceived the business model. So here's one example about key activities. There was a kind of a description about each of the attributes, and the partners were then, they indicating what is the situation right now, what is the situation going to be in 2021. And if we put this in the business model canvas format, you can see all of these individual attributes in here. As you see, it's plenty of items. In total, 101 attributes. So basically, we could be arguing that Living Lab business model is consisting 101 items. So here's one example, a little bit different layout. You have on the left-hand side, you have key partners, key activities, key resources, value proposition, customer relationship, channels, customer segments, cost structure, and revenue streams. And if it's in the dark green, it's highly relevant. It's like a light green. It doesn't show it well in here, but light green, it's medium relevant. And gray, it's weak relevant and non-relevant. So basically in here we can see, for example, in this particular case, key resources, personnel was very important, as well as the infrastructure and technologies. They are operating through long-term relationships and project-based things. And when you summarize everything together, we can get kind of an average Living Lab business model, which is in here. The darker green indicates that the more Provahealth partners was indicating that is important. If it's red, it means that nearly nobody was kind of focusing on those issues. So basically, we can see in here that, for example, in revenue streams, project grants, it's definitely the most dominating thing to have. And the cost structure, what is costing in here is the personnel, and so forth. And once again, based on long-term relationships or direct personal contacts, we are operating a project-based setting. So, during the project, we had a lot of discussion about that, how different or how similar we are as Living Labs. So we tested that out. Difficult-looking illustration, but you can see here, it's basically like a matrix. Each of the Living Labs in here, and you can see if there's a correlation or not between the players. On the red indicates in here that those 2 Living Labs are actually going to the opposite directions. And the green ones indicating that they have a similar business models. So, to sum up that, so we know that the basic attributes of the Living Lab business models, but also in a way which is bad from the transnational Living Lab concept point of view, we don't have similar business model. So we are actually trying to build up a transnational collaboration among the players who have different objectives, who have different business models, which also, of course, makes things a little bit more difficult. And also because we were collecting the situation today and the 2021, the situation is not going to be changed. We're still going to have different business models. And actually the drivers that are driving the business model development among the different players are different. And like Fred was also highlighting, we have different types of Living Labs within this community already, like these university or research institutes-driven Living Labs, industrial cluster or network-driven Living Labs, and these kind of regional public authority or the local authority-driven Living Labs. And there are some differences between these type of actors, like the how the partnership with the educational organization or secondary care organizations, how they use students and end user panels as a resource. What about the educational or scientific publication and paid media channels, how they are utilized, how much is put an emphasis on the marketing, how the NGOs and educational organizations are seen as the customers, ability to generate revenue via education and training services, and expenditures on the traveling. To sum up, once again, business models are changing, but the change needs are differing between the living labs. Revenue stream and cost structures are kind of the most similar items between the players. Projects and fixed funding dominates as a revenue source, and then the personnel is, of course, the highest cost structure. So there are these underlying factors that are influencing for the living lab business models, which are like changing the political climate, which can actually cause a kind of a domino effect for your living lab approach. For example, in Denmark, they had a new government coming in, and they were changing a kind of how the living labs could be operating as a part of the regional healthcare system, and that kind of changed drastically what they can actually do. And also the maturity of the living labs and how kind of productized their services are, and easy access to the healthcare infrastructure, and how the collaboration within the local or regional innovation ecosystem is working, and if there are, for example, some kind of large-scale infrastructure projects like building up a new hospital, that of course creates a lot of demand. And we argue that the successful business model among the living labs requires kind of the seamless collaboration between these three types of players. And there's a bunch of publication which has been done as a part of this project, so these are also available through the online channels. Okay, let's jump on the services, because one of the key items, of course, as a part of the living lab business model is what kind of services you are offering. And how we did that, because the Provahealth project was kind of heavily dedicated to help SMEs to kind of create and co-create their solutions and help them to become international players. So we did 82 semi-structured open-ended interviews on all of the countries that were participating on the Provahealth projects. And through that, we kind of created a typology for SME needs for their living lab services, and there's one publication about that. And then also we collected the best practices among the Provahealth living labs. We had workshops about kind of trying to understand what are the services and the current service portfolio among the players. And based on that, we kind of developed the service portfolio framework, which includes at the moment 43 different services. And then we are identifying each living lab service portfolio against this framework. And as a part of that, we have a kind of short definitions for the bunch of different services, like, for example, expert opinion. Expert is a person who has a long-standing experience about a certain thematic area, either because he has been working as a practitioner or he or she has a scientific background. And when the SME or whoever wants to be creating solutions, they can give a kind of a professional opinion about those issues as a written format for them. Orchestrating business ecosystem and network coordination, it's about how we can connect the dots between the players, because I was highlighting in the early part of my presentation that this is about open innovation ecosystem where you have multiple players, and basically you will be needing the healthcare infrastructure, healthcare professionals, you need the patients, you need the other public authorities, you need the academia people, you need the companies, and so forth and so forth. And the whole idea about the co-creation is that there will be a bunch of players who are working together. Of course, somebody must be there to kind of orchestrate that collaboration. Ideation, concept, co-creation workshops, which is basically like from few hours to maximum 1 day session with a limited amount of persons, let's say 12 person or 20 person, co-creating together a new solution by using some kind of service design or other collaboration methods. So basically we have a kind of a list of these kind of short descriptions. And in here we have the Living Lab service framework, which consists kind of a few main categories: innovation management, ecosystem orchestration activities, market and competition intelligence services, co-creating products and services, testing and validating services, management consulting and funding support, marketing and sales support. So innovation management, ecosystem orchestration, it's about the Living Lab project planning and management. You have to be mapping stakeholders, you have to orchestrate and coordinate the network. And also a very important thing is that in many cases, the problems are so complex, and we have to be understanding what is the problem, and for that you actually be needing like a collaborative effort to define that challenge. And that's why it's part of this kind of an ecosystem orchestration section. For the competition intelligence services and marketing intelligence services, it's about understanding what is the competition, what is the market. You benchmark your solution against the other players. For that, you can also do literature reviews and document reviews. You have to understand technical requirements. You can do foresighting. You use user personas, and you have an access to data. Co-creating products and services, you can use expert opinions, focus groups, interview surveys, workshops, customer journeys, expert by experience, so common persons who have experienced a certain, for example, illness, and through that they have become an expert on that topic. Research panels, observation, shadowing, ethnographic studies, hackathon jams, design sprints, which are kind of lasting more than 1 day, typically from 2 to 5 days. Highly intensive co-creation efforts. Testing, you can be testing ideas, prototypes, proof of concept tests, small scale, real life test, impact assessments, post-market surveillance testing, concept and feasibility testing, usability, simulations, large scale testing, validation testing. In management consulting area, you have sparring and advisory services. You helped to get the funding by, acting as a grant writer or helping to understand where you can find funding. Healthcare and environment is really regulated and very complex, and unfortunately the situation is different in different countries. So also this legal regulation and safety standard support is very important. You can be renting the equipment and facilities, doing risk analysis. Some players provide funding, IPR support, marketing and sales support like showrooms, landing support, ranging on events. You offer online or on-site visibility or presence. You can get the user-approved certificate. Okay, this was the tested as a part of this and this thing. And when the SME is just entering the market, it might be very important to get kind of a validation or certificate that, okay, at least somebody is believing on these products. And the public procurement support services. So, thank you. This was the presentation phase, and now I'm ready for the questions.
Thank you. Thank you. I picked up, I will ask one question first, and then you also have a chance to ask questions. But I picked up one thing that you said in the beginning of your presentation, that companies tend to turn to the Living Labs like not early enough, actually. They come too late. What can we do from Living Labs side to attract companies, is it some kind of service design or some other motivation, or what should we do to have a early stage startups also to
I think one of the options is that at least this has been applied in Finland quite a lot, that you have this kind of public funding for this kind of small scale experiments. But in many cases, those are also kind of maybe focusing too late phases. So I think one of the items would be that we would be actually introducing like public funding instruments for SMEs to apply for these kind of services. There are, yes, those, but in some cases, of course, your startup company, you feel confident that we know the world where the world is going on. So that is the kind of, and partly is the not resources available or certain kind of things, because there is a cost for that, yeah, of course, when doing that. And if the SMEs don't have, or the startups don't have the funding, so that's the one kind of drawback over there. And the other thing is that really understanding that, you know, that slide that I was showing, that, you know, in the early phases is much more cheaper to make changes. And I think you have to be very confident to understand what is the actual need, because still the cost of testing or cost of interacting with the users in the, let's say, 3-hour workshops or whatever. And we know based on the Provahealth interviews that in many cases the SMEs are using their friends or families to do that. But still, I would be saying that that's a kind of unbiased environment, especially if you are trying to, you know, to get a solution in certain kind of markets where you really need like let's say a patient or the healthcare professional to do that.
So as I understood, then there's a gap in funding for sure, and also to have a better model with how to collaborate and also awareness raising among companies, I guess.
Yeah, and I think in general the Living Labs has been very poor on marketing themselves in a way. And also there's this big confusion about that what is a living lab, what is a test bed, because there are kind of the similarities, but there are also differences. A few years ago I did a study about that, you know, how the scientific community has been seeing as, you know, the test bed research and the living lab research. And there are much more, like 10 or 15 times more research on the test bed field or test bed topic comparing to the living labs. And in case that the test bed is more like an engineering type of thing, that where you are actually trying to validate or test out something that is ready or more or less in a later stage of the innovation process. Whereas I think the Living Lab is also highlighting the early phase of the innovation process throughout this service design or co-creation approaches, that we actually engage the users already from the idea generation and opportunity identification to make sure we are actually trying to solve the right problem. Because the process is always that you first have to understand the problem, and then after that you make sure that your solution is actually working correctly. And so basically there is genuinely two phases. And to playing for the Living Labs, I would be saying that let's put more efforts on the marketing. And as part of this Provahealth project, the aim is to kind of consolidate the information that I was showing over here, and as well to present that what kind of services each of the Living Labs within this community are offering, and trying to harmonize the service offers so it's easier for SMEs and other players to understand what is the actual service, because during the project we end up in a situation that we were talking the same things but different terms, so we have to be harmonizing our message to our customers.
So there's a lot of, we should do a lot of from our side as well.
Definitely, yeah. And it's, to be honest, it's not an easy job, because as you notice that the business model among the Living Labs are different, our understanding about the services and how we call them are different, and to kind of achieve this kind of a transnational maturity model that Fred was presenting. So we are not yet on the level 3 where we are actually collaborating. We are probably between the kind of a coordinated networking thing somewhere a little bit further on that, but it's I think that step from, it's easy to jump from the networking to coordinated networking. That's not that big jump, but the next jump from the coordinated networking to collaboration, to me it's much more difficult to do, because for that you have to have at least some common understanding and some common, the commitment among the players beyond the one single project.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, actually, what companies expect from us is like clear understanding what are the services, how much, how long, and what is the model, or what is the model to enter to this system.
Yeah, and I really truly hope that even after this Provahealth project we can continue to work either with the other project or as a unfunded network in a way that to harmonize our solutions, because that is really important if we want to be promoting the Living Lab movement towards. You really have to do that, because if they don't know what is the service or what is the offering that we are offering, then it's our fault.
Yeah, sure. Now question, yeah, please. Use a mic.
Okay, thank you. Actually, I'm an IT person, but I compare this, your approach, very standard and, let's say, regulated, with a real startup world. There are two questions. 9 out of 10 startups fail. You have to pay back the public funding then, in your case. And second question is that it's almost, it's not exceptional, but it's every day at successful startups. Final product is not where they started. It's completely different. It's evolution.
Yes.
I mean, Skype founders actually started with pirate file sharing called Kazaa. And when they switched from file sharing to the voice in the same network, it was $1 billion company. Because money drives around. So funding is different, regulated, public. And can you handle this kind of...
Yeah, this is exactly that where we can help the startups, especially because the Living Lab environment is a playground where you can test different solutions in different setups. So the whole idea is about that you should be trying out the different things, because if you are, yeah, and also in a way that are there kind of a genuine market demand already in the beginning on when you are starting the things. My message is kind of the more you can interact with your target audience or target customers in a way, the more you will be receiving information about that what could be actually selling and what could be actually being a kind of a profitable business. And throughout the Living Labs, we can be providing, or we can help the company or the SME or the startup to do that, because we are kind of an experts of co-creating together with the users, and we can help on that one. So that is kind of my message, and it's definitely that most of things will be failing. So that's the sad truth about the innovation processes. But of course there is also this message that the sooner you fail, the cheaper it's for you. And in a way that if the first interaction that you come is very late, that your solution is almost ready, and you realize that, let's say, a doctor say that there's no need for that at all, we change our practices for this and that reason. And that is also the thing that come with these interviews, is that especially when you enter in the healthcare field, and if you are technology-driven company who don't have any understanding about the healthcare field, your solutions is driven by the technological opportunities, and then in many cases you might end up kind of solve a problem which is not in a high demand list for the healthcare professionals or the patients. Even if it's technically possible to do, it doesn't say that there's it's a valuable solution for the particular practitioners and so forth. And I think that is the kind of the mismatch. There should be this technology push, of course, because many of the things are driven by the technology, but you have to make sure that there is a market demand. And Living Lab between that is an excellent kind of a tool or approach to do that kind of a collaboration.
So message to the tech people is that if you have a great solution, then find a problem for that. Or just you can't open the door of the hospital telling that I have a solution, please give me the problem. You just have to define the problem before you start working.
Yeah, and in a way it's also very demanding to do some co-creation within the, for example, in hospital settings, you have all the regulations and you have to have a permission from the ethical panels and so forth. And that's why also I highlight that, that there's plenty of opportunities on the preventive healthcare side, which is not that heavily regulated, and especially in many kind of national healthcare strategies are highlighting the preventive healthcare field. So that would be definitely a much more easier way to enter the healthcare field, if that's something that the companies are interested in.
Okay. Thank you, Teemu. So many questions, so we have to, Tiina, and then, and then you can also ask.
Okay, thank you. I don't know how, do I have a question, but maybe comments. So I think that where we have to focus to develop Living Lab and new technology and new services is go to the starting point, like you also asked. And it means that what is the Quattro Helix Corporation? What is the role of academy? What is the role of different type of professionalists? And what is the role of users? Because Living Labs are open innovation platforms. We have to somehow focus more to get the needs of the users and also define who are the users. And we also have to look to the future, because all kind of development, technology, ICT, whatever, are developing so fast. And my example comes, for example, from academy. So more and more, also the students in healthcare area, they are studying nowadays business thinking, because they need to get to find out the needs of the patients and populations, people's families. And I have researched in the professional collaboration and education, and that is maybe one what we should learn together. What do you think, Teemu?
I didn't really get the question, but I can comment on the topic as such. For example, I really believe on this kind of the collecting the understanding about the users in general. And for example, in my university, we just changed our strategy last year. So basically, what we are doing, and as part of the normal studies, typically when you have a university lecture or university course, and you have a bunch of studying tasks over there, all the information and all the data are remaining between the teacher and the students, or maybe in a good chance between the class. So we have made a strategic decision that we are actually starting to collect the cumulative data about the markets and user needs as a part of our studies. So basically, whenever we have a course which is doing, for example, on interviews in the healthcare field or whatever field, so there will be a kind of a systematic way to collect that data, because that is really expensive. The putting a person to do an interviews and doing observations, that is, you cannot be scaling that, because there's a person who have to do that. And in many cases, for example, SME or startups don't have that kind of money. But what if you would have that kind of an information available already? So basically, we have 8,000 students. Each year we will have new students doing exactly the same courses, or let's put it this way, similar courses. And every time let's say you go to interview the senior citizens on a certain senior citizen house. So each year you will have that. And throughout that, once you have that data, you can be kind of analyzing the data and generating these generic user personas. And if the universities and academia can give kind of these user personas, which are kind of these stereotypic users from the particular user groups, then that would be actually very helpful for the companies, because they could be looking, okay, in this field we have this type of a doctors or this type of a doctors and so forth. So you already have at least some understanding about the users, and that is our approach. And there are other ways to do that as well.
Yeah. Quick question.
Thank you for your presentation. My question is the Living Lab concept only open to creativity and innovation, or you guys also adopt like technology transfer or in knowledge transfer from other sources and incorporate it into the Living Lab, or it's just strictly creativity?
Yeah, I think there's no restrictions as such, and that's a very important point, because there are a lot of these kind of things that are operating already in the different industries or different disciplines, and there's a great kind of an innovation potential on those fields. Let's say, the how to book a trip or how to book appointment to doctor. I'd rather be using, the booking my airline tickets from the airlines than going through the healthcare appointment for the doctor. So we have already kind of a bunch of, the working solutions in the other fields, which could be actually very beneficial for the healthcare systems. And that's why it's really important. We can be taking solutions or the approaches or processes from other fields and try to fit that in a way. Of course, you probably have to do some adjustments, but you don't have to invent everything from the scratch, because there are solutions available or technologies which you don't know that, okay, this could be fitting very well in here. And there are great examples about that.
Thank you, Teemu. And I think it's time to move to our last presentation before the lunch. So Katri-Liis will speak about self-assessment tool, and during this project we developed a digital tool for living labs to evaluate their well-being and services, right? Mm-hmm. Katri-Liis, please.
Yeah, thank you. Hello. I come from Tallinn University, and at Tallinn University we have adopted a strategic approach to focus on intelligent lifestyles and also contribute back to the society. So in our living lab we are focusing on well-being of people. But yes, in this project then we developed a tangible tool, and I will briefly talk about that tool as well. So the idea behind it is actually that the living labs themselves as organizations would try to strategically develop themselves. So this is the big goal really behind it, and we would like to help them do so by identifying and assessing themselves different phases in their development, and they would be able to analyze what is good and what are the shortcomings about those various phases in their development. So this is really what is behind this particular tool. And then based on the analysis, obviously one could then draw some conclusions and make some better further planning. So we would hope that the tool is really easy to access for everyone, and it's also easy to use, and it's currently available online. And we have also tested it with our living labs in this particular project here. So already the previous speakers have covered a lot of that context, and this each phase in that toolbox also addresses some of it, or actually tries to provoke the people who fill it in to think about those phases and how they involve the users and how they go about the co-creative processes in their living labs. Also, we understood during this project when carrying out the tests that quite often there are conflicting interests between what the companies would like to test and which are actually those ideas more than ready-made products and prototypes, but hospitals currently, due to the lack of resources, are more interested in actually trying to test something which is practically ready. So there's all this in the background as well, that maybe the demands as well as the supply might differ currently, and that toolbox would help also living labs to understand more whether they are actually corresponding to the user needs or the needs of the companies as well. So quite often in the case of the test labs, which were also mentioned, the testing is focusing indeed on the end final products rather than co-creating with the users from the very beginning. So that's again, how do we set up those processes? We should try to think more about those. And the methodology is the key part there. This is where the universities can help you to identify what kind of methodologies we actually need and what are the ethical considerations behind it. And we do have all those ethical committees in place to guide us there, how to deal with the contracting and privacy issues with of the users, and give you answers how and why to actually carry out particular tests. Well, financing was mentioned several times already, so that's the challenge still there, and very clearly links to the actual business model of the living labs, which would hopefully then think about what kind of monetization opportunities themselves as organizations have to get financing for their services. So there were a lot of desk research done in order to actually set up that toolbox, and I would only mention one source, one academic source, so I'm not going to give you an academic lecture here, but what we found relevant really was the so to say triangle where we actually link the living lab ecosystem and its approach to the innovation outcomes. So essentially that means that for getting better innovation outcomes, the actual ecosystem matters a lot, and how, what it consists of, what it looks like, and how we co-create with end users. So this is a brief extract from the actual website, what the tool looks like in the beginning. So you already saw a lot of those several times, the phases. So we have sticked to the same phases, and everybody who fills it in can then evaluate it on the 5-grade scale. Also, you can say that one of those phases might not be relevant for you. And I think this is actually an important point to make, that whenever you feel that some of those phases does not really apply to you, then it is completely okay. Because I would also like to stress that it is not of utmost importance that you would get the grade 5 for every stage, because as was mentioned previously also, that the living labs are very different in their nature and different as organizations. So therefore, some of them might not actually focus on all phases, and they might be better and more successful in some of those and lagging behind in some phases, and that is completely okay. The idea is to think about strategically about all of the phases and just analyze and see where you have maybe shortcomings and where you have bigger successes. So this is And this, each dimension links back to the discussion around the ecosystem and approach, so that the first phase is link to the ecosystem. So to what extent and how the environment for the companies and users to test is very cozy in a way, how it is also safe and secure, and how well the processes in terms of methodologies and also the guidelines and contracts and the legal framework is set up. And the later stage is then link it more to the Living Lab as an approach and more with the interaction with the users and analysis around that. And eventually, what you would see is a radar which gives you an understanding where you stand, and that's the picture you would get, as well as the tips and tricks around this, maybe improvement and changes needed. Just to finalize, some of our end users have also commented it and given some idea what they think about that self-assessment tool. Generally, the feedback has been rather positive, and maybe also that here's another comment how you would need to think about the different phases, but you can't be good at all of those because of resources. And I think that the final quote is a nice one, which would all hope that we keep up this network no matter whether we have those financial resources, but we keep sharing the expertise and the information that we have received during those years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Katri-Liis. So, any questions from the audience?
Quick one.
Yes, yeah.
Comment. I've been doing some process assessment, and there is a little conflict. Self-assessment. I'm assessing and then showing to others that it is unpossible. External assessment seems to be more valid, and this assessor must be even best cases certified. Do you have comments or?
Yeah, thank you very much. Indeed, this is more aimed at like developmental processes within the organizations. For instance, if the Living Lab starts with its own strategies and really tries to see where are the potentials for more better development for itself, and depending on also the ecosystem around it, so that it is really in that sense more of an internal tool currently for the Living Labs. So the external evaluation is surely very, very important, and actually we've been talking about it that we could also add the tool for the companies who actually use the services of the Living Labs, and we have also asked a little bit the companies that have been currently with in the interaction with our Living Labs in the project and how they assess the services, but a little bit the self-assessment tool in that sense needs to be tweaked then to be better serving the needs of the companies and allowing them to actually better evaluate it. But you're quite right that this sort of external evaluation, and also again the side of the users is surely very much needed to get a comprehensive understanding where we stand.
Actually, you answered my question. So this was also my concern, that how we should develop this further and what we should do this with this tool in the future. But every single company can use it.
Yeah.
So it's available online, and hopefully also after the project ends, it's doable to test yourself. Yeah, Tiina?
One comment that we already started to develop a version
Mm-hmm.
for companies.
Okay, then soon. Now we are ready for lunch, I guess. Thank you, Katri-Liis.
I would just kindly ask everybody
Yeah, this was, I didn't understand your, but yeah, there is this registration, and now I guess that we can end the webinar for 1 hour and come back when we continue. Thank you all those who were online, and people here. We can go to have a lunch in F-Hone. It's right across the street here. But please, first, it's kind of embarrassing, but sign the paper there, and then do please join us to have a lunch in F-Hone. Welcome back to our Living Lab Summit pre-event here in Palo Alto Club offline, and for those who are online, also welcome back. So in the morning we discussed and talked about the different services that Living Labs can offer to the companies and how Living Labs can actually evaluate their services and improve their performance. And my name is Piret. I'm the Health Tech Division Manager in Science Park Tehnopol. And today we will now continue with the presentation from the project. We had quite many testing activities, and now Jens will talk a little bit how it went and what were the good outcomes and what were the lessons learned during this testing period. So Jens, the floor, or I don't know how to call it, it's yours anyway. Jens will be online.
Hi, and welcome to my presentation on evaluating transnational living lab testing in Baltic Sea region living labs. My name is Jens Dinesen Strandbæk, and in the Provahealth project, I am the Group of Activities Leader for Work Package 4.2. The purpose of Work Package 4.2 was to set up, conduct, and evaluate on 14 pairs of tests conducted across the 8 different countries in the Baltic Sea region. The purpose of which was to provide living labs from across the Baltic Sea region working within health with the opportunity to evaluate on their current products or make them ready for new markets. The purpose of this presentation is not to provide you with a framework for what to do if this is what you want to do. The purpose of this presentation is simply to state what we did and what we found in our evaluations. I'm going to do this in a 3-step rocket. Or 4-step rocket. First, I'll introduce very quickly the Health Innovation Center of Southern Denmark, where I am employed. And then I'm going to take you through the 3 phases of our report, which we are currently finalizing. The report will be ready sometime April 1st, 2020. If you're interested in this report, don't hesitate to give me or send me an email. If you're interested in more of the details from this presentation, don't hesitate to write me an email. Being that this is a video presentation, I'll keep it somewhat short, somewhat light, and more of the data is found in the report. This presentation will cover the 3 main aspects, as does the report: matching and contracting, evaluation of work done, and future perspectives. So starting up with introducing the Health Innovation Center of Southern Denmark. Now that is Southern Denmark as in the region of Southern Denmark. This means that we are a staff unit working primarily focused on servicing the hospitals of our region. We are an innovation unit servicing the 6 different hospitals with efforts concerning innovation in its most broadest form. This ranges from setting up, conducting, and monitoring the building of new hospital wards or operational theatres, introducing new technologies, and redesigning workflows around them. We also comment on national or European Union legislation concerning healthcare or technologies or services which might be implemented in healthcare or have an impact in healthcare. Given that many of the difficulties that we currently see can be tackled from many different perspectives, we engage quite often in identifying real needs in the hospitals that we serve and then translating them into solvable problems which companies or we can try to solve. This form of public-private collaboration is what stems or have driven our interest into the Provahealth project. We typically tackle these forms of problems with identifying stakeholders very, very broadly, meaning both patients, clinicians, service staff, or members of the wider community or society as a whole. In the Provahealth project, one of the things that was a main issue was establishing this relationship. identifying not the problem which needed to be solved, because that was brought to us by the SME, but identifying the collaboration between the competencies of the project and the SME in question, which would be given access into the project. This was what we call matching and contracting. So the heat map shown here will be a recurring thing both in the report and in this presentation. So very, very quickly. At the bottom, you see the different choices of answers to the questions which are posed on the left side. At the very top, you see the number of responses for each question, which is added up based on choice. So you can see the amount of people, or the amount of responses, which are very satisfied, somewhat satisfied, neutral, or dissatisfied, to each of the questions. And at the very top, you see the total summary of each of the choices. So very satisfied is 44. At the very top, you see the living labs. Overall, we have 98 different data points or different answers for both of these heat maps, one showing the SMEs responses and one showing the living labs. For the SMEs, of the 98, 87 are positive. From a living lab perspective, 78 are positive. Put another way, we have a degree of satisfaction at around 80 to 89% regarding matching and contracting. That's quite significant. If you look more closely into the data, you'll see that the living labs find the aspect of time and resources to be less satisfactory than the other parameters. It's unknown if this is due to some living labs spending significant time with SMEs who they then end up not contracting with, but still having a feeling that this phase was somewhat too long and thus negative. But for the involved SMEs, this was not found. The phase of matching and contracting for all of the SMEs is significantly positive and was part of a value creation for them. In terms of what created these delays and what was the cause for these delays, when we look at the comments made to the data, we typically see that third-party entities, specifically de minimis regulations on government funding and state-level support, was the cause of these delays or was a major point of work which needed to be overcome. So definitely a finding there. In addition to this, some of the living labs involved in the project found that a more extensive dialogue between them and the involved SMEs could have benefited the project. Now, these comments were typically made by living labs who, down the line, found that the product or service which was to be tested in their living lab didn't really feel up to the level of maturity that the SME had indicated beforehand. So they thought they had a product or service which had a certain level of maturity, but when the living labs then started and initiated these different kinds of tests across these 14 pairs, the reality was sometimes somewhat different, meaning that the level of maturity for the product or service was not really there yet. It was not ready to meet the target audience or be quality tested in the way that the SME thought that it was. Now, this obviously is a great issue. If you've planned and conducted and contracted someone for a test concerning something very specific and then not being able to do so. But this was a very, very minor thing in the grand scheme of things. But this misalignment of the expectations going into the project was something that we saw quite a bit, but to a lesser degree. But again, across a great many pairs. So it is still a significant finding, meaning that we would absolutely recommend following this and doing more extensive talk. And as a living lab, viewing the matching and contracting phase as part of the value creation. Because when we ask the SMEs where they found value, that value starts at the very start, not with the services actually provided. As you can see on the quotes, many of the living labs found the process to be cumbersome, too prolonged, and not providing value. This, I think, underlines what I just said, that you should not view matching and contracting as something which is a part of the initiation of the value creation, but is part of the value creation. It's a difference, it might seem minor, but it is a difference that living labs have that SMEs do not. Not the 14 living labs that were involved in the project anyway. Concerning the actual work done, or the evaluation of the work which was conducted, here is a heat map which is somewhat skewed from what you just saw. This is a combination between expectations and quality found, meaning that if I had somewhat high expectations to the work being done in testing, which is phase 5, and I found a very high quality, my quality found is +1 from what I expected. Thus, I get a +1, or in this case, just a 1. As you can see, on the top, many of the living labs got what they expected. And more crucially, at the bottom, most of the SMEs found the quality that they were expecting in each of the different phases. Now, keep in mind that a negative rating in one phase can easily be a part of a testing which has a higher quality found later on, meaning that there was a misalignment of what we were talking about or a misalignment of where the quality is rated. So overall, view the summaries, the 38 on par, so to speak, for SMEs, the 26 of +1 and the 2 of +2 in quality found over expectations for the SMEs. As a general statement, this is on par, and on par, finding the quality that you expected might not be significant, might not be positive, but the level of expectations generally is on a scale from 1 to 5 is around 4.5. So it's quite high. And finding that expectation and meeting that expectation, and in some cases exceeding that, that's quite remarkable. Again, across the 14 pairs. Now, as you can see, some of them miss the mark. Some of them realize a quality found of -2, meaning a significant decrease from what was expected. Obviously, that's not good. But it could be that for these two who have a -2 in phase 1 to 5, so summary of the entirety, and a -2 in phase 5, it could be that the product delivered here didn't meet the standards that the Living Lab thought that they had to work with. So they had to redesign the whole thing. Now, that would not meet the criteria of what was expected, but it can certainly provide great and valuable output. Going a little bit deeper into detail, we see that the satisfaction with the different kinds of aspects for the work done is again very, very high. It's worth noting that some living labs found it hard to recruit external parties. Now, external parties can mean a great many things, but mostly it covers possible users, so clinicians, patients, relatives, who would be invited into a living lab setting and be asked to evaluate a product either by physically handling it or by evaluating it in a more abstract form. As you might be able to see, some of the living labs indicated that they had difficulties recruiting external parties. Now, this didn't translate into an issue for the SMEs. Most of the living labs conducted this recruitment by themselves, meaning that the SMEs weren't privy to the level of work being put into it. But more on the point, the amount of persons physically active and physically present at the different kinds of tests which were conducted were more than satisfactory. And the information that the SMEs got from the tests and from the interviews and the usability ratings or the usability tests conducted was more than satisfactory, despite the fact that the living labs didn't find this. This might be an issue of not seeing the same things, or the SMEs simply being blind to the different range of users needed to validate their product. Or it might be that the living labs are overly critical of themselves. The comments would suggest the latter. This, I think, is evident in the center column top quote in which an SME has indicated that this was a very professional test conducted with a very high value for the company. And if you look at some of the other quotes from especially the living labs, you typically see a level of reflection on the user's involvement, which is quite critical. Now, obviously, building on these kinds of experiences is very, very important in terms of building long-term trust. We asked some of the SMEs, or all of the SMEs, on whether or not they would be willing to repeat the process that they had just concluded, or if they would be interested in contracting another living lab for another task at a later point. This, on future perspectives, clearly indicates across the board that when first you've contracted a living lab for a test, you see the value because of the very high degree of satisfaction and the level of SMEs who would recontract for the same task, do the same thing all over again is very high, and the degree of SMEs wanting to contract another living lab for another task is again very, very high. It is somewhat spread out more evenly, but again, it is significantly high. And this value, I believe, is seen quite clearly in these few quotes, which we've collected, all from SMEs who were involved in the project. It's a very positive experience. The participation from the entire project team and the results were very, very insightful, and it enabled SMEs, or at least one SME, to enter a new market with their updated product. So, on the point of key takeaways, the tests conducted within the Provahealth project provided significant value to the SMEs involved. The matching and contracting might, to the living lab, seem like a preamble to something which is value creating, and thus something which sometimes is rushed, or at the very least something which should be concluded so that work can begin. This is not the case. SMEs find the entire process, including matching and contracting, as a value-gaining or value-providing phase. So living labs must pay attention at the very start as well. Recruitment, especially for tests, is obviously vital, but keep in mind that output is more important than input. It doesn't matter how many people you recruit, it matters what they say and the breadth and the depth of what they say. And then once you've tried a living lab, you're likely to come back. This is interesting because many SMEs across the Baltic Sea region and beyond haven't tried living lab services. But what we see from this project and from anecdotal evidence from the 14 living labs involved in the project is that we have many repeat customers, so to speak. We have many SMEs and many organizations who come back once they've felt and experienced the level of co-creation and participatory design that we typically bring to the tests and the work that we conduct in living lab scenarios. As I said in the start, we are currently finishing up the report, finalizing the findings of Provahealth Project Activity 4.2. The report should be finished sometime around April 1st. If you're interested, please drop me an email. If you have any questions or any comments on this presentation or something else, please drop me an email. Thank you for your attention.
Online yes, you are there. Hi, Jens.
Hi.
Thank you for the presentation, and really remarkable work was done during these 2.5 years. Any questions from the audience for the start? Well, I have one question. I saw that there was a somewhere written that this process took too long time. So, in your opinion, what can we do, or what should be done to shorten the process?
During my presentation, I wrote with the technicians. I can't hear a word you're saying.
Ah, you can't hear me.
Babbled. And it's not just you. It's also my presentation. I didn't actually hear anything.
Please
I'm
let
fairly
Jens.
certain I remember what I said, but I can't hear the audio broadcast.
Yes, Jens. But can you do something about it so Jens can hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, but it's very, very muffled.
Should I do something like... They are fixing it.
Wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But Jens doesn't still hear us, yeah?
Yeah, I hear you, but it's very, very muffled. And
Muffled.
you can try speaking again, and we'll see how it goes.
I'll try to speak very slow. Do you hear me now? Okay. So thank you for your presentation. Great, like a lot of work was done during these 2.5 years. But I noticed that there was, in your presentation, you said that the process took too long time. And for innovation, if it takes too long time, then it might kill the solution like already in the beginning, or if you don't know how long will it take. So in your experience, or like in ideal world, what should we do to facilitate the process to be a bit faster and more efficient?
That's an excellent question. From our perspective in the Provahealth project, we had 5,000 euros to facilitate every single test. And we had living labs who were open, engaged, had a value proposition which was pretty clear, and able to interact with a lot of different SMEs. Now, despite of that, they had significant issues in identifying who to collaborate with, even though they had all the money. And one of the issues that we typically found from the SMEs that were interviewed and asked to participate in the project, but who ultimately turned it down, they said, well, it doesn't matter that you have the money, we don't have the time. And how to fix that issue, I don't think we can from a living lab perspective. But if we accept that, and if we accept that some SMEs and some companies will not have the time to engage with us, then facilitating the tests of those who actually have the time, that's obviously creating a framework and an environment within the living labs in which we are active and engaged in seeking out collaborations, and we have a pretty clear pathway, a pretty clear sales funnel, if you will, from identifying a lead or an SME, and then what steps to take and what actions to take before a contract can be signed. Keeping in mind what I said in the presentation, that this process is part of the value creation for the SMEs, at least for the 14 that we interviewed.
You also mentioned third parties, but I guess that Esther will focus on the so-called third parties in more details. But any quick questions to Jens from the audience? Not at the moment. So thank you, Jens, and thank you for your contribution. So see, it works also like in this format. So thank you. And we will continue here because we were talking about different aspects involved in these projects and different stakeholders. And I could hear from every single presentation there was a small hint about third parties or policy level. So Esther will now speak a bit, or Beata. You do together, okay. Esther and Beata will talk about this topic, and then we can have a short discussion what to do with the third parties.
Hello everybody, I will be the one who starts the presentation. My name is Beata Krawczyk and I represent the Upper Silesian Agency of Entrepreneurship and Development in Poland. And we are a task leader, the leader of providing policy recommendations in the project. And we are cooperating with Esther Davidsen, who is a policy advisor and help us to prepare a nice policy recommendations after the project. So I will tell you something about the task and all the process we go through. Then Esther will tell you more about directly the policies we invented, elaborated with you. So, as the application form in the project says, we have a task to give an advice and prepared policy advice and recommendations, kind of guidelines that can be published and actually used by the politicians to improve the situation and the living lab developments, as well as the cooperation with the Quattrohelix stakeholders. That's the question, how we did it, and if it worked, or maybe it will be something, a kind of success. We are also obliged to address the following stakeholders, as it is also written in the application form. So there are regional, national, transnational, and EU level stakeholders. But during our first workshop in Lublin, we discovered that we have to also take into account the local level of the stakeholders. It is an initially part that also have to support the process. So we are also elaborating the policy recommendations for the local level of the stakeholders. There have been established 5 questions, and all the work has been done according to those questions that has to be answered from the different levels of the policy, for the different stakeholders' point of view, but still those questions, you will probably see them also in the presentation again. So it took over a year to prepare everything, to conduct the workshops, gather the input from you, from the partners, and elaborate the policy recommendations. So it was like the first workshop in Lublin was held in May 2019, and then there in Lublin we worked in groups of input of policy levels. So we gathered information and we had a discussion about the policy levels. What are the most important? What are their tasks? What has to be improved. Then in September, we asked partners to provide the questionnaires from the roundtables meeting. That was our task also in the project, that each partner in their region should conduct the policy, the roundtables with policies. To improve the input after this, we provided the questionnaires for partners with those 5 questions we already talked about, to go for the nice conclusion afterwards. And then in Oulu, we decided, after gathering material from Lublin and from the questionnaires, we decided to work also with partners in a perspective of Quattrohelix personas. I will talk about it later. Then the final workshop in January this year was a kind of summary of all the work that has been done. All the conclusions gathered from May in Lublin, in Oulu, and in the roundtable questionnaires. And we were trying to prioritize the statements, what are the most important things for you. So this is a kind of input from the workshop in Lublin. So we were working in groups, as I said, and we had a discussion, what are the tasks from the local level policy, regional, what are the barriers, what has to be improved also. This is an outcome of the workshop in Lublin. It is used, the graphic is used in the report. I won't go to details now. Esther will tell you more about it. It's just to show you that we had really a lot of input after this workshop. And the most important was to include the local level into our stakeholders' policy levels. This is about the questionnaires. So, as I said, in the survey, we provide you those 5 questions to be asked and discussed with the regional stakeholders in our 14 Provahealth regions. And these are the results. I decided to show you the chart because it's really interesting. In total, we have 63 questionnaires because we asked you to provide as much questionnaires as you can. So thank you for that. And it was divided into 4 Quattrohelix stakeholders groups. So as you can see, we have a lot of input from the public sector, but very, very less from the end users. And that's quite interesting conclusion. So it turns out that we are gathering input, talking about with the public sector. So apparently with us, among us, because our living labs are mostly public funding, so public bodies. So even at this initial stage, we can't achieve end users, and that's also a nice conclusion that we maybe should have any discussion and go to the end users directly. Oh yeah, that's only to show you how much work it costs to have a nice analysis after the questionnaires. I provided the presentation in Lund with the graphs about the questionnaires, so you know this already. But I wanted to show you that here we had a lot of data to be analyzed, to be structured. What are the most important answers among the stakeholders? And we did it in the terms of the group of the stakeholders, but as well country by country, because it's also interesting to know in which country what are the main conclusions of those questions. And this is just to show you how we decided to present it in the main report. So each question was analyzed, the answers were analyzed, and you can see the bigger circle it is, the most important answer or advice to this question it is, so the most common answer. So here, in this case, professionally driven Quattrohelix ecosystem was the most important. We also had an input from work package 4, where the interviews within 87 SMEs were conducted. And we decided that it is also a nice input to our task. That's why we had it also here, and it's also just to show you the work that has been done. A lot of SMEs needs, SMEs feelings about the cooperation, and what the SMEs representative think that Living Lab should do or need to do or have to do, as well as the public bodies. And finally, the workshop in Oulu. So we went through the creative thinking, design thinking in personas, for group of persons regarding Quattrohelix perspective. And we were working also in groups on 3 challenges. So the issue of framework policy, the practical advice, and the culture and communication issues, because that was the conclusion from the workshop in Lund, that these 3 statements are the most crucial and problematical somehow. So we also elaborated a graph, and we decided to divide the group of the public sector, because it turned out that there is a quite broad group of the public sector bodies. So we have politicians, but also nurse and the doctor working in the public hospitals, and also the municipality, so the local level of the policy. And the SME, the academia representative, and end user, of course. And this is what we got. It's available in the report, not to read now, but we also achieved really nice input for the policy recommendations. And finally, workshop in Lund. So we gathered all the material we elaborated with you so far, and we had 55 proposal of policy, like a main statement. So Esther prepared it and asked in Lund if you to prioritize those tasks. I mean, you were supposed to set 5 when it's something is the most important for you, and 1 if it's not that a priority. So this is just the table how to count all the votes. It took a lot of time, but now after that we know what is the most important and what has to be provided among the policy recommendations. We also have a graphics and the charts. We are still working on the graphics, and now it's also just to show you that we have divided into 6 levels of policies. So those statements, the 55 statements, were divided into the issues of local, regional, national and transnational and EU levels of policy, but as well from the perspective of Living Lab needs and the networks or project to support the development of the Living Labs. And now Esther will tell you more about the direct policy recommendations after all the work that has been done.
Thank you very much. Yes, so all this work has gone into 7 policy recommendations that I will now introduce to you, and I can see also echo from all the presentations, the other presentations that we've heard today in terms of the business model canvas, the SME needs, and then the SAT tool, and then there's a lot of echoes that I hope if there's still time, we can still add things, but these are really the recommendations trying to sum up and have a sort of set of recommendations that we can use and all of you can use at the different levels for the further work. So first, a policy recommendation, and I think that also has been expressed earlier, that you really need a strong policy support, but at all levels. So not only at your own local or regional level, if this is something that has to exist in time and has to have a sustainable life, it needs to be built up slowly and securely. So I was actually interested to see that the EU level seems to play an interesting and an important role because a lot of the strategic thinking and the strategic objectives come from the EU level. And once the EU level has decided a strategic direction, and the EU has the advantage of having 7 years of budget period, which is longer than most of us have at the local or regional level. So if the EU says go for quadrihelix, that is a good way of running economic development, set up living labs in this open innovation way of working, then that is actually going to trickle down through the national level, regional level and local level and have an impact. So that's an important, I think, takeaway. That is actually, it's a very visible value chain. Even if we think that EU is far away in Brussels, it has a big impact. And then also that at the very local level, and that has also been said before, the living labs must mirror the local collaboration setup and the local issues. And then we have examples of that in terms of the local living labs that have a different theme. So it's really all the way. The next one. This is a cultural thing, that we have different cultures in our different quadrihelix stakeholders here. And there's a disconnect, and I think Timo was very clear on that also, between all the different players that are involved. They're disconnected, they're fragmented. And the needs of the different players here are very different. And that was very, very visible when we did our personas exercise. So those of you who participated, if you were an end user, or if you were an academic, or if you were a hospital, the needs are very different. The end user basically just needs service. The hospital basically just needs something that works. The company needs something that can be sold, and it's to match those needs. That's the whole exercise we're doing. So we must have those platforms, and also I think Timo, you had a very thorough list of suggestions, proposals for how to run these platforms that can create this dialogue. So that should be enshrined in the policies. And that was this next conclusion. Yeah, so you must involve all the stakeholders, the quadrihelix, in both the design and in the implementation. So have the platforms to both have for the end users, which we saw have actually been very little present in our in our project. We were not able to collect a lot of feedback on the needs of the end users. So that's a lesson to us, I think, as most of us are policymakers, or we exercise in a living lab, but still we had problems creating the connection to the end users, or at least we were not able to get their feedback when we had in the questionnaire exercise. So end users, and then how to get the needs, the ideas from the health system. There, we also had some good examples in the projects on how to do that, because if the ideas that the companies bring do not meet any needs, then we have a solution without a problem, which is sort of a bad situation for an entrepreneur. And this meeting the dialogue platform, how to bridge the gap, and in terms of language and vision between the companies and the public health system, the platforms, the many ideas, and then to have this openness of dialogue, and that's always difficult because words mean different things. So this is really it's a philosophy or an atmosphere that should be enshrined in the policy design. 4, very professionally driven, and this, as it was one of our readings of the SME analysis that Jens presented before. These are the demands of the SMEs coming from the SME interviews, that they expect the living labs to have very strong structure, to be sort of strong met with professionalism, that they must have a very broad set of skills, so they must have business knowledge, and they must also have end user knowledge and be capable of able to involve end users. They must be able to they must have knowledge of the different funding schemes, and then be fast enough or rapid enough to talk to business. So it's really it's a lot of different skills. And what we have seen, I think, a lot in our analysis is that all the answers that we collect, also in some of the business model canvases, they describe our own processes as living labs, and that's one of the skills needed to be able to describe the process and respect the steps of a process, but that does not give you market knowledge or capacity to actually run the user involvement. So it's actually a very difficult job, and that also comes down to this interdisciplinary and the knowledge. Yes, I guess I said, and this also the communication and marketing team. Are you also that is something that has come out not from the SME interviews, but from our stakeholder surveys, that we feel that we are not known enough, or that people do not know us enough, or that we are not acknowledged or seen. But lots of that comes down to communication, to have clear and precise messages, both on results and what we're actually trying to achieve. So we should not be talking too much about our complicated bureaucratic processes. I think we should be talking more be really sharp on this one, which is difficult when you're a public organization and have a lot of both policies and politicians involved that want to get into the press. But be professional and sharp and consultancy-like on this one would benefit many of our living labs. 5, and that I guess I said that a little bit, a lot actually. Simple messages, strong marketing, objectives, activities, and then also be visible at events. That was also one of the outcome. You must. One thing is creating websites and running mails and newsletters and the like, social media, but you have to be strong and visible at events to create and bridge the communication gap to the people that you're trying to reach. They will not necessarily, the companies will not necessarily understand a public website that has a long description on processes. So go out there and talk to them. That's part of the message. And then, so for the transnational policies, how to address, what should we do, how should we tackle the transnational challenge. And we met during the project all these partners, projects, organizations. Lots of it is actually still, it's Interreg financed projects who have been doing a little bit of the same thing, that matching companies with living labs, aiming to get those companies to test abroad and give access to markets abroad. And they are all in the open dialogue philosophy environment. Please come and let us do this together. So that is really the message. We're all working in this space. We're all sort of beginners. It's a little bit an infant stage, but there's work to do. So let's start by at least networking and linking up to each other, meeting, and then we will have much more impact both at the European level and also then trickle down into through the different policy levels. And also, yeah, some of these we all have different profiles in terms of knowledge and access to markets. Some are more pharma or hospital oriented, some are more consumer, elderly home oriented. And if we tap into a network with sharper profiles, it's easier for us to match the companies that we want to help go abroad. And then the final, so that is again same message. Really, all levels need to have the strategic vision of the Quadrihelix collaboration and of the Living Lab philosophy, because that also means that they will set finances aside once something is listed in a strategic objective and a strategic document. Then the government funds usually follow. Also, they need to value the cross-sectoral needs, the cross-sectoral dialogue and the needs. And then we had a couple of examples from Sweden and from Finland of smaller financial, locally decided innovation voucher schemes that had proven useful as a first step for companies to enter into the Living Lab test process, and then following up from that, moving into testing abroad. So these are the 7 policy recommendations. They are described in our report. And the short one that is summarizing a little bit of everything. I won't read it, but that is really our short recommendations. And I think that's so much for the short presentation and summary of the work that we've been doing. And thank you for all your help and your input in the process.
So I love strategic plans, especially when they come with an action plan and money. Then they probably will work. But questions from the audience? Yes.
Thank you. Just personal experience. I was part-time part of the Baltic Sea region project. And the problem was that actually the topic maturity in this Baltic Sea area, except Estonia, was lower, and this was not very good cooperation going on. For example, Portugal was same maturity in Estonia at this time. And this created for me confusion, and this project was not very successful. It was at this time electronic identity cooperation across borders. And at the same time, it was also parallel with some EU-level projects. But this is kind of one of the 0.6, I guess, cooperation between different networks. And in my case, it didn't work very well, and part of the reason it didn't fit now, it was nothing to do with Baltic Sea area, it was EU level, and this network was actually a bit restrictive. did you see something similar there? You have this kind of more than one region. Ithata, Osiris, I'm not sure what they are. But for example, this poster is Baltic Sea region. And also here, some presentation was Baltic Sea region projects. So I saw a little confusion. It was 1 year only for me when I worked with this project. You know, is any improvements?
Well, we've met it also. It's, as I said, it's an infant exercise, and it's the matchmaking is very difficult because we have so many different companies working in so many different fields of health innovation. It covers a lot of different sectors. So the networking is definitely needed, because we will not get any closer to each other or understand each other if we don't do the networking. Now, to the exact matchmaking, it's easier with a bad Portuguese partner than with no Portuguese partner. So we need to have those networks. And then, I was up to the Innovation Skåne. They had some proposals on how to move this forward, and I think we all agree that we need another project or project money. We're not ready to pay. Our organizations are not ready to pay membership fees for an organization yet. But we need something, and so what shape and form I don't know.
So what will happen to these policy recommendations from this moment? So how we can deliver the message to the different level decision makers?
Yeah. So there, for all of these 7 policy recommendations, you can make an action plan. You can take them away and use them at your local level, on your regional level. They are a project outcome, and they are sustained by the outcomes of most of these projects also, because they have the same sort of message. And then how to take it on to Baltic level or a European level, I think that's up to all of us to discuss, and I hope that is something we will be discussing tomorrow also with those partners we're able to come, and those we have online.
So, any questions? Because as I understood, the list is still open, right? Adjustments could be done.
Yes.
Some additions. And I guess that if you don't want to speak out loud right now, then also later on, Esther is here and Beata as well, so you can give your contribution or say something about it and discuss your ideas, what should be done in order to get also politicians involved, other than current crisis. So. But if we don't have any questions from the audience, then thank you.
You're very welcome.
Yeah,
but just as last word, perhaps to say that the report is online. We're still working on the on the graphics, because there's a lot of data, and we're trying to. Beata is struggling to put that into nice graphs. Yeah. So the report is online, and we are also aiming to have it ready within a couple of weeks. We haven't set a date, but we're just working on it. So any comments, very welcome.
Yes, and so we will, like you said, Esther, we will continue tomorrow. We will not cancel our event also for the people who are online, and we will have the same format tomorrow as well. So those who will show up will come, and the rest can follow the webinar format, and most of our presentations, either we have them in person, or the presenters sent their presentations already for tomorrow. So yes, please, if you are able to join, if you are willing, feeling well, then please come and join. But the rest you can follow us online. Thank you for today, and good job, I guess. Yeah.